Some people really hate their jobs, so the question gets raised. How much money do we need in order to stop working? In this video, we'll be going over the dollar amount needed as an end goal to achieve the answer to this question. The first step to this process is the simplest and sometimes the hardest part. You need to know the dollar amount that you spend each year. Adding up all the credit card bills, rent or mortgage, the insurance, any cash purchases you made, utilities, and so on. Basically, you're going to want to look at all the bills you try so hard to forget about. But wait, you clicked on a video about how much money you need to retire, so why are we looking at past expenses? Essentially, think about what retirement really is in essence. We work in order to go make money so that we can live decently in our lives. But retirement, as an end goal, is the disconnection from the need to go to work. In other words, financial independence. If our end goal is the option to not need to work anymore, then we come back to the beginning of the video. How much are we spending each year to live comfortably? For an example, let's assume that I spend exactly $50,000 each year for all expenses totaled up. Obviously, your situation will be higher or lower, but for an example, to make things very clean with our numbers in our calculations, I'm just going to use $50,000 as an example. Okay, so I'm spending $50,000 a year for my current living condition. Now we move into phase 2 of the plan. We need to know how far away our retirement date is and how long we plan to be in retirement. For the time estimates, let's assume someone is 20 years old today. They want to retire at the age of 50 and only use the investments to coast through retirement and never work again. The time horizon for how long this should last we'll assume will be 50 years, assuming that we'll live to be 100 years old. This video is focusing on the actual dollar amount to work towards, and not the journey of how much money to save each year to reach that amount. That video on how much is needed to save will be made at a later time. For now, we'll focus on how much to make our goal by the time we hit the 50-year-old mark. As it was mentioned previously, our current bills are listed at $50,000 a year. Sadly, $50,000 is not going to be the same as it is 30 years from now due to inflation. That actual value of each dollar decreases as time goes on. Inflation could be its own video, but I won't get too deep into that in this video. So what's the amount of inflation that we have to deal with when saving for our lifestyle to remain the same as it is currently? I have a screenshot of the Fed's FAQs, which talks about their inflation target rate. Listed towards the bottom, they mention that their goal is about 2% each year. Now remember, our example is a 20-year-old saving to retire at 50. That means 30 years worth of inflation to save to and incorporate in our example. Using an inflation calculator, that means our $50,000 lifestyle today, after 2% inflation each year, is about $90,000 worth as our cost of living 30 years from now. It's worth mentioning that adding a little bit more to what's calculated could be beneficial. Having the extra safety cushion in case of medical emergencies or other financial setbacks is a good idea. For this video, I'll just be continuing to showcase the example from the assumption that we're spending $50,000 a year today and $90,000 approximately 30 years from now. So now we know the amount of money that our investments need to generate for us 30 years from now in order to retire. And that amount is $90,000, given our example. This number might seem big now, but remember that this money is in the future, and people 30 years in the past with the same living condition probably thought $50,000 was a lot relative to their time compared to today. Now we're getting into the actual dollar amount that we need to save by the age of 50. This number is going to go up or down based on how conservative you feel you need to be. I'm going to reference the Trinity study done on investments being held and spent in retirement. They are famous for talking about the 4% rule for your withdrawal rate from your investment nest egg. That means taking out 4% of your current investments as spendable income. Our spendable income, that is our target from before, was listed as $90,000. Finding out how much we need then just becomes a matter of using algebra. We'll rearrange the equation to figure out the actual dollar amount that we need following the 4% rule. Now, before I reveal the actual amount, I just want to emphasize that there's more to this than the 4% rule, which we'll get to later. Anyways, following the 4% rule, our target dollar amount to save towards is $2.25 million to maintain our current spending habits in retirement. The study found that if you invest 50% of your money in stocks and 50% of your money in bonds, withdrawing 4% of your money will be fine for 25 years, 100% of the time. Doing it for 30 years, you'll still have money left over 96% of the time. Only if you retired in a very unlucky year and never made any money after retirement, the 4% rule didn't work. If we remember from earlier, we planned on having savings ready for retirement to last us 50 years. The study found that it became increasingly riskier as time went past 30 years due to variabilities in the markets. So, to make up for it, let's be more conservative and use 3% instead. So using a more conservative 3% withdrawal rate as opposed to the 4% one, let's go through the motions again. We can see it's the same process, just with 0.03 instead of 0.04. At the end, we see that our new conservative end goal is now $3 million. The numbers work like this. Assuming 7% average returns, and then you subtract the 3% withdrawal rate, and then subtract the 2% inflation rate, you'd be left with your investments hypothetically growing past that at an additional 2% each year. And I say hypothetically because there could be incredibly horrible economic events in the future that would reduce investment returns, or hyperinflation that reduces your effective purchasing power. However, the date range they backtested for their study was from 1926 to 2009, where each year was tested to see how effective this method was. And as mentioned earlier, even with the stock crashes from 1926 to 2009, this study gave a success rate of 96% over 30 years, regardless of the start date, and that was with the 4% withdrawal rate. At this point, I know what a lot of people are thinking about: two major things. Number one, what about stock market crashes ruining the portfolio? And number two, how am I going to get that much money? The study was backtested from 1926 to 2009, and this included the Great Depression, World Wars, crazy high inflation, and the Great Recession. Although past performance does not equal future results, it's worth mentioning that the study's numbers went through some hard times similar to the theoretical ones in the future that you're thinking about. Ultimately, investment of any kind involves risk, and understanding and controlling the level of risk you have is to ensure the stable returns regardless of the economic conditions, which will be greatly beneficial in retirement. And as far as number two's question, how am I going to get that much money? This question alone will take a while to explain in greater detail, so I'll be making another video in the future about how it's possible to get there in the future video. So what do you think? Leave a comment if you think 4% is enough, or if you think withdrawing 3% is more reasonable. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications to see updates on this series and other series that I'll be doing in the future. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button so that others can see it as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.